Good evening and welcome to the school board meeting. It's Monday, May 11th, 2020, 6 o'clock. Susan Tully lives in the boardroom. I have to call the meeting to order and ask Mr. Tully to call it.
All right, Mrs. Fisher.
Here.
Mr. Gayhart.
Yes. Here.
Mrs. Ingersoll.
Here.
Mr. Martell.
Here.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Here.
Mrs. Ray.
Here.
Mr. Scarrow.
Here.
Ms. Degner.
Here.
Ms. Gottschalk.
Here.
We do have a quorum. We will continue. We'll note that this meeting has been noticed per state statutes. If you have any community participation, see none, we'll dispense with reading that and move on to our meeting minutes from April 27th, which is attached to your agenda. Any questions on those comments? I'm not hearing any, so just looking for a motion to approve them.
I move to approve the minutes of the April 27, 2020 regular session school board meeting as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the April 27th regular school board meeting as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Gayhart.
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll.
Yes.
Mr. Martell.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Mrs. Ray.
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow.
Yes.
Ms. Degner.
Yes.
Ms. Gottschalk.
Yes.
Motion carried. General and other fund bills, Mr. Truman.
The general other fund bills this evening covers checks number 139812, 139892, wire transfers 770 through 775, ACH checks 298 through 306, and then 5 voided checks 139272, 139275, 139413, 139720, and 139802, in the combined amount of $851,755.99. And then there was a memo with some additional information on several of the bills in your packet.
Questions, Mr. Truman?
I just had two quick ones. There was $798 for the Chula Vista Resort. I'm assuming that's for future.
It was actually for past. It was, I think, a March 2nd or March
Okay.
3rd
Okay,
workshop. Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
And then what's the low incidence consult? It's a vision consult. What is?
That's
what
for
is that?
special ed
Oh,
services.
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Got it. That was it.
Other questions? Not hearing any, so looking for a motion.
I move to approve the general and other fund bills of May 11th, 2020. Check numbers 139812 to 139892. Wire transfers 770 to 775. ACH check numbers 298 to 306 and voided check numbers 139272, 139275, 139413, 139720, and 139802 in the combined amount of $851,755.99 as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the general and other fund bills of May 11th, 2020. Checks numbered 139812 to 139892. Wire transfer 770 to 775. ACH check numbers 298 to 306. Voided check numbers 139272, 139275, 139413, 139720, and 139802 in the combined amount of $851,755.99. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Fisher.
Yes.
Mr. Gayhart.
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll.
Yes.
Mr. Martell.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Mrs. Ray.
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow.
Yes.
Ms. Degner.
Yes.
Ms. Gottschalk.
Yes.
Motion carried. Designation of public depositories, Mr. Truman.
As part of the annual reorganization process of the board, there's a listing of depositories that the board should approve as part of that process. So there's a list that's been supplied. Basically, it's the same list that we've had in past years. The only change is Edward Jones was on the list a year ago.
We got, I
that's
was trying to
right.
figure out, there was one more, and I
Yes.
couldn't figure out who.
And Edward Jones was on because the school board had 2 trusts that were scholarship
Oh,
trusts.
Right, and they
That
got
transferred to the foundation, so there's
Right.
really no need for them on there any longer. But US Bank serves as kind of our main depository, along with the Advia Credit Union. And then PMA and the local government investment pool are kind of the 2 investment vehicles.
Questions, comments? Remarks? Not hearing any, so we do need to approve those depositories. Looking for a motion for that.
I'll move to approve the designation of public depositories as presented.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve.
Just
the
like it's, a you know, it's an important voice.
Voice like that.
Move to approve it's been moved and seconded to approve the designation of public depositories as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll,
Yes.
Mr. Martell,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow,
Yes.
Ms. Degner,
Yes.
Ms. Gotcha.
Yes.
Motion carried. Phone system proposal, Mr. Durkin, I'm guessing.
Yep, Mr. Dricken, if you want to unmute, I'll
All right. You
try
got-
to anticipate. If you want me to move forward, just let me know.
All right. Yeah, you can slide ahead. I figured we'd just start with just kind of a quick rundown of where we've been, what we currently have for phone systems, and what prompted the need to look at a phone update. Our current system, it's an NEC system. We've had it for, I mean, it's been there before I've been there. The NEC system, we've done an upgrade about 8 years ago. That was a forced upgrade because that system at the time was kind of going end of life, and NEC required an update, which is the same thing that we're facing right now. We have, so NEC basically said at the end of 2019, December 2019, they were no longer going to provide support for our model of phone system. We do have support through a third-party vendor that we had a contract with from July through June of 2020. So they were going to honor that as best they could. But after June 30th, they were no longer going to be able to provide support for us for our current system. So that's kind of what prompted this need to look for a new system. Just kind of give you a scope of what we have. We're about 345 phones in the district, along with voicemails for each of those. That's a combination of support staff, teachers, conference rooms. Currently, with the type of system we have, it's called an on-premise system. So all the hardware is on our location. We purchased it, we own it, and that requires phone line data circuits from the phone company to Meltone. And the big limitation with this type of phone system, which at the time was really all that was available, is we're limited to the number of phone lines coming in and out of the building based on the number of data circuits, phone circuits that we purchase from the phone company. So currently we have like 6 lines at the district office, I believe 6 at the high school, 3 at the elementaries. So really that means, let's say the elementaries, 3 people could be on the phone at once, and then anybody calling in is going to get a busy signal. And if anybody else tries to call out, they're going to get fast busy. They won't be able to make any calls. So we haven't noticed that as being an issue internally so much, but we really haven't heard a lot of feedback, or we don't really know how many times parents have been getting busy signals when they try to call in. I've heard periodically from Tammy Sturkin at the high school with attendance at certain times of the day. She'll have a little bit of feedback from parents that they've been getting busy signals. So that's another indication that, the district's growing, and it's a factor that we had to look at when we were vetting different phone systems. Currently, our phone budget, Mr. Truan and I sort of went back and looked at the budgets over the last several years, and for the phone services, the support, U.S. Cellular, some data circuits, it's about $70,000 a year that's been budgeted for all these services. And as we'll see as we go through, the proposal or the recommendation is going to still fall within that guideline, so there really won't be any additional funds required for an upgrade here. The process we took to kind of start off looking for a new system, new vendors, I checked with local districts, reached out to them to see what they have, who they're using, sent out requests for proposals to some of those vendors, and also some contacts I've had from over the years through different conferences and seminars. Came up with a list of features and sort of gotta haves and some bells and whistles to just kind of have a baseline for comparison for the other vendors as they were doing the presentations. We set up presentations with these 5 vendors and just kind of let them show us what they had, and then went through the kind of analyzed what their features were, who had, what they all had to offer, and compared between the 2 vendors. And then part of that process, we analyzed the cost. But when we're looking at vendors, the lowest cost isn't always the best solution. We had to take into consideration what kind of support was going to be offered, what's the quality of their services, and we got some of that information based off the recommendations. You can go ahead, Jason. So what we learned through this process, over the years, the technology department has been kind of the go-to first point of contact for any phone requests internally, any changes, extension adds, moves, changes with automated attendant and voicemails and things like that. So I had a kind of a good feel for what was needed and what has been requested from the buildings. For the most part, we were looking for, really everybody just wants a dial tone and voicemail. But there were a few little features that have popped up throughout the years that would have been nice to have. Some do not disturb scheduling options into the classroom. Right now, obviously, having a mobile app for your phone that the teacher or the staff could take their extension and use it anywhere would have been a huge advantage at this point in time. One of the other features that we learned about here as we were going through talking to the other companies is unlimited phone lines. And like I mentioned earlier, we're currently limited with the number of dial tones that we can get into the building. And over the years, since we've last updated our system, there's been a trend. I mean, it's been going on for a while, but it's more mainstream now as far as a voice over IP or hosted phone solutions. So that means we don't have the hardware on site. There's not a large purchase for the equipment up front. It's more of a subscription-based monthly fee for the services. So then the vendor has all the equipment, and we're pretty much getting our dial tone through the internet, which means we have unlimited phone line availability. So if we have an internet connection, we could have 100 people on the line, and somebody calling in still would not receive a busy tone. So that's probably a huge advantage as we move forward. And then improve customer experience. We were kind of thinking about, from a parent's point of view, that not receiving a busy tone is a huge advantage also. So I have three of the 5 that we did the presentations with. So these were kind of top 3. The TDS and the 8x8 vendors, those are hosted solutions. And then the Mitel is an on-premises solution. So you can see on the chart there, the one-time cost for the Mitel, since it's on site, we have to purchase the equipment. It's $164,000 up front to purchase it. But then the monthly cost is a little bit lower because we don't have that subscription based. However, with that solution, we still have to provide dial tone from the local services. We still need to have some local service, the data provided. The other big difference here between the TDS and the 8x8 is that monthly data connection to Tibbetts. Currently, you might recall, I'm not sure how many years ago, we went through a process of connecting all of our buildings with our own district-owned fiber. So we did not need to have leased data circuits from the phone company. However, Tibbetts was too far out of the town, and it wasn't cost prohibitive to. We weren't able to get our own fiber out to Tibbetts to make a connection into our network. So we still have a leased connection from TDS. And when we were working with our local sales person from TDS, he was telling us how TDS is really putting an effort on local entities, the government and schools, and where they have a presence, and are really trying to do all they can to keep that business. And I have to say that he really did a good job for us when he went out bidding, because several other vendors that I was working with said that normally the 8x8 solution underbids everybody. But even you can see here, even their straight monthly cost, TDS was still lower than 8x8. So they were really doing a good job. But on top of that, in order to really keep our business, they said if we were able to bundle the services, they could lower that leased circuit to Tibbetts, which is normally $1,700 a month. They would be able to lower that down to $500, which when that was put into the calculations here, it really, cost-wise, it really was almost impossible for anybody else to beat that. So I have just a cost of ownership down there between three vendors after the first year and then after the fifth year. And you can see TDS was still lower than all the other solutions, even though the monthly cost would have been less with the upfront purchase for the on-premise from Mitel. The leased services or the hosted services from TDS was still less expensive than the on-premise systems. You go ahead, Jason.
Randy, are all of these numbers E-ratable, or is this after the E-rates taken into consideration?
The only thing that's E-ratable would be that data connection from Tibbetts. E-rate has been sort of phasing out the voice services over the last several years. So that $500 or that $1,700 is before E-rate. So we would still get about a 60% discount off of those numbers. So our recommendation is to go with TDS. They were the least expensive, but like I said before, that's not really it's an important factor, but it's really not the only driving factor. TDS, in part of their proposal, was able to give us their highest level support. So they said we have a direct line calling into the support. We won't have to have any waits or any callbacks. I can't read that. It's a little small. Let me switch to my other screen here. It's for one of those other options.
Which one cost already?
Yeah. So really, like we were talking about before with that budget, U.S. Cellular, that is not going to go away. We still have those costs. So that's still going to be within that 70,000 phone budget. But switching to the hosted solution, the services coming up to the building, that dial tone, we don't need anymore because this is all going to be running through the internet. And that data connection is going to be cut in half. So that was a couple huge benefits there. Some of the references we checked, City of the Police Department in Elkhorn uses TDS. I talked to them. They're really happy with the system. Wheatland Schools, I think, Jason, you were involved with bringing TDS in over there. I talked to their check director, and he says they're really happy with it and still planning on renewing. Talked to a couple other, the church, the school, and Hillsborough. So really nobody had anything bad to say. I asked them if there was anything they would like to see changed or enhanced. And there really wasn't anything. They said the templates to create new users is the interface to manage the system. It was very intuitive. They really rarely need to call support for any additions, new extensions, moves, things like that. So it seems like this is a pretty solid solution for us.
Randy, could you share with the board, I think one of the questions you asked TDS is what would their monthly fee be even after 5 years? I think they addressed that, didn't they?
Yeah, so this was a 36-month agreement for the price, the kind of the numbers that I'd listed there. After 36 months, we can either renew or go on a month-to-month. And either way, he said the prices will not be increased. They'll be either the same or go lower. And that's pretty typical with technology. Prices is always going down. But he did say that we would be kind of locked in at that price or better.
Yeah, the hardware will have been paid for by that year 3 on their end, right?
So there's really no hardware purchase with this. It's all leased. We do have the phones, and part of they use Polycom phones, and Polycom has a promotion right now where it's a penny a phone. So our phones, I believe, are costing us $150, something like that. Normally, retail price or the price that we would have been paying would have been over $70,000 for just all the phones that we need.
I had the opportunity of, Randy invited me to sit in on a lot of those presentations, and it was I think, interesting. I think both of us thought going into it, we'd be looking at a premise-based system.
Right.
And as we learned more on the technology, it became obvious that the hosted was probably really the better option. And the phones are a real commodity today. And I think the other piece, and Randy alluded to this wasn't a front burner item for anyone here at the district about our phone system. We just knew that it was eventually going to be. I pulled my phone and turned it over, and I see that the desk phone I have at my desk was purchased in 1998. And it still works, but a lot of them are starting to fail. So we found a third-party provider just to kind of replace some of those phones. But the main thing is that the support and everything else is going to go to the wayside. I give Randy a lot of credit because in addition to all the technology things going on right now and keeping the distance learning running, he was also working on this project, and I think came up with a solution that not only will enhance, I think, service, but fits within our existing budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent job.
Yeah.
Really, really good job.
A few years ago, I know our company switched over to voice over IP, and I haven't had any problems with it. In order to do so, we had to run a fiber line into the building to get enough data, but no, we haven't had any issues. And it's nice, again, we do hosted. Somebody else has the hardware.
Yeah, the hosted solutions are nice also because anytime there's new updates or new feature sets that are coming out, they're automatically applied. With your on-premise solutions, a lot of times you're limited by the hardware that you have, so you won't see any of those new features until you do a physical hardware update.
And I think the ease of the app, correct me if I'm wrong, but the TDS also has the app where the staff can easily transfer their calls to their cell phone if they want, correct?
Correct, yeah. So the proposal that we got includes the app for all staff, so they could use it's an app that'll run on their cell phone, and they can it'll basically be like their desk phone. So there's their personal cell phone numbers, not given out to the public. The public will see it as their number. And along with this, we also have DID numbers or direct dial numbers. So every staff will have a direct dial number instead of if they don't want to dial through the switchboard or through the office, they'll have a number they can dial directly into, into the staff's phone if they have a need or desire to do that, hand that information out.
Well, yeah, it seems like a no-brainer to me, and having been in a district previously where the phones were no longer supported, and I had to drive around the state to scrounge up phones from other schools. When that's what we do, we post on the listserv, hey, we need this type of phone. Anyone have any laying around? And I would drive up there and buy their leftover phones that were sitting around.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to experience the TDS in Wheatland. That was my last year after I bartered for phones to replace the old ones. Yeah. And you gotta have them. All right, thank you, Randy. I guess we need a motion for that. Right?
So looking for a motion, unless there's any other questions from Mr. Stricken, but always looking for a motion.
I move to approve the phone system proposal as presented.
In a second.
Second.
Then moved and seconded to approve the phone system as presented. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll,
Yes.
Mr. Martell,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow,
Yes.
Ms. Degner,
Yes.
Ms. Godchaux.
Yes.
Motion carried. Board discussion items. Mr. Deadline.
All right, students, anything you'd like to share with the group?
So this last week, some of the elementary schools have been doing teacher parades. So I know there's videos and pictures on Facebook, but a lot of the students have loved seeing their teachers, and a lot of the teachers have loved seeing their students. And then a second thing is that AP tests are starting this week for the high school students. And that's a big change because they are all online. So they took out they basically left the tests so that they're just free response questions. And they took out the multiple choice and some writing stuff. So high schoolers are going to have to adjust to that in these upcoming weeks. So.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, I had the opportunity to drive with the Jackson staff as they went through their parade. What surprised me was the turnout, how many people came out of their homes and non-staff, elderly people, neighbors. There was a lot of people that came out for that. And then I was able to drive through the Tibbetts. They did a reverse parade where people drove through the school and the teachers were there. And that was pretty neat.
It was an hour to get through the Tibbetts one for me.
How was
Was
it?
it for you?
I should have ridden 10.
You should have.
It was 10 minutes.
I saw that and I was like,
there.
oh, you're
Yeah,
gonna
it's
be forever.
I'm driving down Tippecanoe going, oh,
I was
man,
like-
I hope I'm not going to get all the way to the end of this.
I
thing.
felt so bad if you lived in that subdivision
Oh,
because
it's
you
hard to
were locked in your driveway for an hour and a half.
Oh.
But it was a great turnout. And the kids loved it. But yeah, I saw you drive by and I was like, oh, you're gonna be here.
All right.
It was fun.
We have school board committee assignments. Do you want to speak to this, Mr. O'Donnell?
Yeah, since we didn't really have any turnover on the board, I thought we'd leave them the same for a second year. It was pretty common, and we didn't have a lot of turnover to run a few years on the same committees, just because you start to get used to it, and it's kind of jumping on and off them is kind of harder, so. If there's something that somebody desperately does not want to be on for some reason, then let me know and we can try to figure it out. That was my plan there.
All right, any other discussion on that one before we go to budget? Turn over to Mr. Truman for budget updates and based on information we have from the state.
Yeah, I think Jason and I were talking about based on the changes that have occurred relative since the last time I think we talked budget as a board, which was back, I think, on March 14th.
14th, yeah.
It seems like the whole world has changed, but we thought we'd spend a few minutes talking about how this is affecting the state of Wisconsin budget, and then really what's going to be kind of the downstream effect on K-12. So a couple of kind of basic facts related to the state of Wisconsin, and then we'll kind of move into our budget. So if you click to the next slide, there's some information on the state budget. I'm not going to go through that, but if you click down that, you'll see the budget brief. So it just kind of gives you the state of Wisconsin budget and how it's broken down in different pieces. But a couple of kind of basic facts is the annual state budget's about $40 billion. And just under 40% of that is K-12 education, either directly in the form of aids or some type of credits, either that you see on your property tax bill as well. So the combination of those things. So that means about 37%. The revenue sources for our state budget, about 50% come through income tax, and then another 30% is sales tax, and then the remaining is corporate tax and everything else. So obviously, if you think about what's going on today in terms of revenues, sales tax, income tax, all of that is being affected. So what are some of the impacts? If you look at that, the governor's office released a projection of about $2 billion in terms of revenue shortfall as part of the biennium, and even the legislative fiscal bureau has basically concurred that's probably a pretty good estimate based on what we know at this time. They do have some rainy day funds that was carried over from last year. In fact, you may recall even last November and December, there was discussion about lowering income tax or giving that back to the taxpayers because they had a nice balance in the rainy day fund. Now it's looking pretty nice that we have that, at least at the state level, to meet some of these shortfalls. So the difference is about $1.4 billion. We get, the state's getting some federal dollars for a variety of sources to deal with the COVID-19. Still kind of a question if they're going to have any what they call state stabilization dollars coming from Washington. There's a speculation that may happen. In past budget shortfall experiences, that has happened, but there's really no certainty of that. So
Depends on how much money they want to print.
it's basically what the problem with the states is the states can't print money. So
Right.
we're kind of stuck. That's just the way it is. But you're absolutely right, Julie. I mean, that's what happens at the federal level. So to kind of deal with that, you probably saw some reductions that the governor announced in terms of the agency budgets, at least at this point, about a 5% cut, which should save about $70 million. Let me click to the next slide. Legislative Fiscal Bureau, there's usually a projection that comes out in May. I don't know if they're going to do one exactly on May 15th. Part of the difficulty is the income tax payment date there in April was extended till July. So how does that affect everything? So it's a lot of just kind of estimation going on. There's some discussion of maybe a budget repair bill. That's not unusual as part of a biennium adjustment. That may or may not happen. I think there's some discussion that with the election coming up in November, there may be less feeling to deal with a budget adjustment bill. So at this point, we really don't know. And obviously, there's not a lot of cooperation from the legislative level to the governor's office. I mean, that's just our reality. So when you figure all of those things going on and not having maybe that good dialogue, what does that leave us in terms of getting good decisions done on a quick basis? I think that's our challenge. So downstream effect, I think, is really looking at a number of scenarios and flexibility. If you kind of click on that sheet, some of this you've seen before. There's a lot of numbers here, but what I tried to share with you is in a column format, a number of different scenarios. The purple one represents what was shared during our budget retreat back on March 14th. So that was based on what we knew in terms of what the standard state budget would be, about $179 per pupil increase, wage adjustment about 1.5%, 10.5% on our health insurance, and you saw kind of a negative number at the beginning, a number of staff proposals, some budget adjustments, and a smaller negative number at the bottom. That's basically what was shared at that time. The other scenarios, really column 2, 3, and 4, are just taking, number one, assuming no wage adjustment, and then changes in the revenue cap calculation, either from $179 to $50, $0, or negative $50, just to give us kind of a sense of what that could look like. And we could run 100 numbers, different scenarios, right? That seems to be at least a range to consider. All of those show a negative balance at the bottom. So how would we meet that if that became our reality? Well, a couple of things. Number one, we're making some assumptions on open enrollment of about 40 students. We know that probably won't be 100% accurate because we don't know at open enrollment. If it's higher, that'll help this number. We always have the operational reserve to look at in terms of our fund balance. I think we'll underspend this year's expenditure, so we would have some dollars that we could use next year. And then we have some monies in our OPEB fund that we haven't used. So I think we have some options as a district for this upcoming year to give us some flexibility. So anyway, those are the scenarios. If you click back then, Jason, to the, I think, we talked about the commitment we made to obviously retain our employees, but kind of hold on the wage and salary adjustment at this time. I think the other piece is this is likely not a one-year problem for us. It's a question, the variables I see is how will open enrollment affect our budget? It does every year. We've been fortunate to continue to be growing. What's the duration of this scenario? Because obviously the longer it goes on, the effects become only worse. So I think it's likely as we start planning that the next buy-in could actually even be worse than what we're looking at now for next year. I think that's a possibility. That could all change, but it's just a wild card right now. But there always is kind of a lag with this, especially for school districts, because just on the timing in terms of how funding works, many times even when the economy is recovering, we won't see the increases in our revenue cap immediately. There's just that lag piece. Even for this year, for our budget, we know our revenues, we're going to receive our revenues, there's no question. But other local governments are probably looking, they usually get sales tax, they get other income, and that's affecting them immediately. So we see kind of a lag to that. It's just the way it works for K-12. We should receive some CARE dollars as part of that Federal CARES Act, but it's really not intended to simply backfill shortfalls. It's to deal with the COVID-19 impact and those additional expenses. So that's kind of the scenario we have. If we click on, I think there's just a couple more. Cash flow considerations. This is an interesting piece. Counties across the state have a one-time opportunity to delay, and Barb, you're probably familiar with this, penalties in terms of a late payment on their property taxes. And as a result, they can delay what's called the tax settlement to school districts. We normally get our tax settlement in August. And that's about $6 million. It's a large amount. Counties have the option then with this to extend that one more month to September. I already talked to our treasurer at the county level, and they intend to make us whole in August.
Right.
Oh.
So
They aren't, it sounds like they aren't going to charge the penalty, but they'll still charge the interest.
okay.
So, but they're still saying that that's a big cut in their budget, so they have to look at what services they can cut and
Yeah.
things like that.
So they have to make up the difference.
Right, right, they
County
still have to
level.
make up that difference.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because I had someone already call me and say, yeah, I can't afford my taxes. It's a business that is just getting started, a big business. And this has hit him really, really hard. And I said, it's after, it was out of my hands, call the county. So
Yeah.
he'll still have to pay and.
So for our district, it doesn't look like this is going to really impact us. Fortunately, we don't do short-term borrowing. We have a line of credit, but about 40% of the school districts in the state do short-term borrowing on an annual basis, usually in August. A lot of times their due date is like the end of August with their prior year borrowing. Depending what county they're in, they may have trouble paying that, having the funds to pay that back, or meeting their payroll in September. So I mean, that's kind of the impact here for a lot of districts. It's likely we won't have a lot of answers by the end of June. And typically the school board approves a preliminary budget. I mean, every year there's always unknowns. We don't know our enrollment, we don't know our state aids, the valuation.
It's worse this year.
It's just worse.
Yeah, yeah.
It's always.
Yeah. And you may hear, the Wisconsin Policy Forum, I thought did a really nice job on school districts and how this is affecting them. If you get a chance, just kind of click on that and read through that. I think it talks a little bit about fund balance and what fund balance is and how, you may hear, well, you just use your fund balance and correct this. Well, fund balance is in cash, but I think it's confusing to a lot of people. So I think we'll hear a little bit more about use of fund balance. But anyway, we wanted to give you just kind of a report and just share an update on what we know at this time, which isn't a lot, but I think we're trying to provide enough flexibility, I guess, to meet at least the short term and in terms of next year, and then beyond that, we'll have to plan for that.
I think there was a lot of discussion, I mean, even up until Thursday of last week, that yeah, there's definitely going to be a budget repair bill. And then the lobbyist for WASDA, John Forrester, who presents at a lot of the school board association meetings, he said that what he was hearing from the Capitol was that because of the federal dollars, which is about 1.2 billion, even though it hasn't been really identified how states can use some of that yet, plus the rainy day funds combined, which gets close to the 2 billion, that a lot of the legislatures were saying, well, it's still with this after the election and delaying it to see. So there still could be one in the summer, but I mean, that's, as Bill mentioned, it may be pushed out a little bit longer. Which is unfortunate because, well, in a sense that schools lag on, filling those reductions, but we also lag on filling the benefits of the good economy. And I think we were starting to get to
Right.
that point in filling the benefits of a good economy. And
Yeah.
now that's pulled out from under, yeah. All right. Any other questions on that or questions for Bill related to that? We did let staff know that with their contracts, what we'll be issuing to them is reflective of their pay for this year. And that everybody has their position, so we're not furloughing or laying anyone off. But that it'll be at the pay this year, and then we'll wait and see what the budget impact is. If they come back and say, yep, you still get your $179 per pupil, then I think that's something the board, we could look at the original plans on compensation. But that's where we're at. And I mean, checking in with the admin, I think the staff have been very understanding. They haven't had questions or concerns brought up in that regard. All right. Then we're to the first readings. I thought the handbook, it's a very large document. The policy committee spent quite a bit of time going over that. What this is the byproduct of months of work from Jody Essman. I want to thank her for all of her time and effort in consolidating the elementary handbook, the middle school handbook, and the high school handbook to make one universal handbook for the school district. So the policy committee went through that and made changes, and what you have is the updated version there. I guess what I'd like to do, if there's any areas that the board would like to discuss in particular or review, we can do so rather than go through this page by page. And if you haven't had a chance to review it, you would still have time to review it again before a second reading. But conceptually, it's not a lot of significant concept changes. It's just melding them, blending them together. Are there any questions or any areas that the board as a whole would like to discuss right now?
I don't have any.
Okay. Then I would suggest, if everyone's okay, move into the first reading on the other policies, and I'll go through these one by one. Due to the current circumstances, prior district policies didn't really permit for what was called as teleconferencing, because that was really the technology that was available when these policies were written. And so a lot of this is based off of legal recommendations and just going through and updating our policies to reflect our current situation. So previously, the pay did not allow or was not given unless attendance was made by physical attendance. This puts in the accommodation, makes it virtual attendance as well. And stop me if I'm going too quick there.
Just, did we check on that? Because I asked about that, if we can make that change without it being at an annual meeting.
I will follow up with Jody. I did not check with
Okay,
legal.
but she may have,
Yeah, she may.
because I know she made a note.
Yeah. All right, so we'll follow up on that. And then the next meeting, so again, most of this language is simply referring to or making language changes so that we can attend physically and virtually as well. This one is related to regular school board meetings. Paul, was this the area that you had a question on, or we wanted to?
Yeah. I just kind of looked at it as we tried to, and basically it was a word substitution, and because it was that teleconferencing, and I think what it was in the past, if a board member was out of the area, they could call in and say, I'm at this hotel conference and we can teleconference in. I think that was it, but now that it's Google Hangout is basically the new delivery system, I just want to make sure we're careful about where it said, as participation shall only take place if notice is given to the superintendent on board by noon. I think that's under the old guise. Being able to interact if no permission was given, it seems too restrictive. Virtual now should be assumed as acceptable attendance and participation as an assured delivery system. And if we go in with the recordings and the Google Hangout like we are now, I think we just want to be clear on that.
All right.
Because
so you're referring to this bullet point that I have highlighted, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure that legacy language was probably in there just to make sure that they had it set up or.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's what it was. And as we update, I just want to make sure we're current, because you can get caught up in some things otherwise.
Yeah.
What if we just strike? Can we just strike that? I think moving forward, the Google Hangout is working well for recording the meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
And even if there's nobody who wants to attend the meeting virtually, we could still use those tools to record the meeting.
Right. And I think what would have been an access by teleconferencing if you were out of the area would have to be clarified with the administration that we could do that at the time. But now that it's pretty much, as long as I have a computer, I can access, and I think that's all we want to make sure is that not only are you permitted to be there, but you're also able to be involved. Because the way that's written, you cannot be actively engaged with it.
Is there anyone concerned with just striking that bullet point, or?
No, I mean, I kind of brought it up. The reason back in, I think 2013, they put that in there was just like Paul said, so that if somebody wanted to teleconference in, that we would actually have a phone
Right.
physically in the,
Right.
because we don't have, a phone.
Because in 2013, we had the tri-phones
Yeah,
and
we
we
had a
did
tri-phone that was
conferences.
there. And we did it very seldom, but I think maybe one time ever,
Yeah.
somebody, and it was actually like a lawyer that called in. It wasn't actually a board member. That was the only time it was ever used up until now. I think I brought it up in the policy meeting. I questioned whether or not that was still necessary. There was somebody that I think Barb may have said that it was still necessary, but.
Well, I was wondering if it was something to do with statute. That's the only thing I always go back to. We have to follow statute.
And the only reason I would say that it might be a good idea, I don't know if you have to give notice to the board president or whatever, or have to extend permission. I didn't really necessarily feel I needed to do that or anybody needed to do that. But what I was worried about is if you don't have notice that someone wants to participate. And right now, obviously everybody, we're going to have participation in this manner just because of the situation that we're in. But at some point, I would assume and I would hope that this pandemic goes away and then we go back to a more normal environment where everyone comes to the meetings. And in that case, we may, I don't know how easy it is to have it on the agenda, to always have on the agenda a link.
It's easy to do. And
so it might be just something that they just let the superintendent know that you want to participate that way so you can provide a link or something. I don't know.
I think we'll just always have that virtual attendance option there, because sometimes we do the student presentations and that can be a burden on the family, or a kid can't come because they can't make it. They can
That's
still
true.
log on and participate. I think it's just a good accommodation to have as a way of doing business from here on out.
I agree.
And
Well, it also fits ADA, a lot of the ADA accommodations, so
Right.
there are some good things about that.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
yes. So, yeah, I would recommend we just strike that, and we'll, way of doing business, we'll always have the virtual link.
Yeah.
We can always change that policy down the road if it's a
Right.
problem.
Yeah. As technology advances, we'll have something else, but I think that's just advancement past the teleconference, that there are means.
Yeah. The next one, public notice of board meetings. We're recommending just striking. We don't have negotiation teams or caucusing. That was back in the collective bargaining. If that comes back, we could always go back and add it, but it's not relevant there. The agenda preparation and dissemination. Recommending that we strike the 6 days in advance. That was back when the packets were mailed. There's statutory guidelines that dictate when you need to have them in place. So the board still gets those packets, but you may get them a day earlier than what you would have gotten them back when they were mailed. But really that language isn't relevant any longer, and it gets restricted as to what we can put on the agendas if we do go that far in advance. The public participation in board meetings. Okay, again, this is the language allowing the live broadcast available for the meetings. And that each of our notices will include a way to log into that. Advancement retention. This one we spent quite a bit of time on. There is a state statute that requires you to have a retention policy. To be frank, the statute is outdated, and it was based off of when it was written and requiring the state exam. The state exam was, I would say, more consistent from year to year, but also the cut scores perhaps were a little more consistent. So a lot of people in the public probably don't realize that they changed the rigor of the state exams about, what's it been, six years ago. And so back before they switched those cut scores, Elkhorn probably had 95% of their students at the proficient or advanced level in reading. It wasn't unheard of if it was a small enough district to have 100% of the kids at proficient or advanced. And that's during the time when this legislation was written, and it was intended for the kids who weren't at that proficient or advanced level, so roughly 5%, that you do a deeper dive and put in academic interventions, look and see what's going on and intervene for those kids. Well, now the proficiency cut scores, in order to be proficient in ELA, you roughly need to be at the 65th percentile in the state. So that means on average, about 35% of the kids are going to be proficient or advanced in ELA. We beat the average. We're about 55% district-wide, but that puts 45% of the student population that according to this criteria, you'd be looking at for potential retention, which we don't do. We also have RTI now that's in place and a lot of other systems that weren't there. So we went back to, well, what would have been that cut score that we really would have looked at for the students back when that legislation was passed. And that's basically if you're at about that 5th percentile or below, we're going to look at that and do a deep dive. We also know there's a lot of research on retention. And keep in mind, that's something that I've done with 2 of my own kids, but they were late summer birthdays and it was based on social, emotional, because I know from an academic standpoint, it's been shown to have a negative impact on students rather than a positive impact on students. And students who have been retained are 10 times more likely to drop out of high school than a student who has not been retained. So we're recommending a lot of changes to that, changes on what are the cuts. We don't want to attach them to titles of proficient or advanced anymore. Those titles change all the time. But what it does maintain is a percentile rank that's as compared to the rest of the peers or your cohort. So that will keep it a little bit more consistent. The other caveat, which I think is a little, I don't know, humorous, but it is what it is the state law says that, well, you have to base a retention policy on the state exam, but all parents, if they want to, can exempt their kids from taking the state exam. So anyway, that's there. It talks about also working with the parents and in regards to that promotion. There's only 2 grades where 4th and 8th grade were required to follow that criteria. Other than that, parents basically have a veto authority at any grade level. Likewise, we also put in there that sometimes, like in my case, you may have a parent or guardian who wants to retain their child for whatever reason. And we outline the process in there, made just a couple changes to that. Ultimately, we want that final decision to rest with the school district. In the really off chance that we feel like, hey, this is really out there not in the best interest of your child. So any questions on that policy? Okay. And then co-curricular code of conduct, it was just language, updating this language, that was it. Now, I know we're probably sick of seeing this policy. It's the middle school looks at those grade checks every 3 weeks. Their middle school sports seasons are really short, so they have more frequent checks. They wanted to keep that in that policy. Any questions on any of those first readings? There's quite a bit. All right.
See you again. Recommendations of district administrator. Personnel.
First up, we have personnel. Want to thank Michaela Miller for her time serving as a high school custodian. She'll not be returning for the 2020-2021 school year. And want to announce we're going to be transferring Megan Bulow over to a high school avid teaching or assistant position. She's transferring from the tutoring position to the full-time teaching assistant position. And then we have the appointment of 3 new staff members. Sydney Radke is joining us from Williams Bay. She was a physical education teacher. I believe is from the area originally, I think over in the Fontana area. She went and was in athletics in college. She was an All-American player for the Whitewater volleyball team. I think 2-time All-American, but she's excited to come and join us. She'll be replacing Mrs. Michelson. And then Courtney Taylor will be joining us as a Jackson special education teacher. This is a new position based on the student enrollment numbers, and Courtney is going to be joining us from Waukesha. She comes very highly recommended. We're excited to have her, and she's currently lives in the school district, but has been working in the Waukesha School District. And then Lisa Smith will be joining us from the Palmyra Eagle School District, she'll be taking the special education position, teacher position over at Options, which we started mid-year this last year, but then the individual who was in that position couldn't continue. So she's going to be filling that position. She's very excited to join us as well. I do have the resumes if anyone wants to look a little bit more, but we're excited to add those 3 members to our team.
Questions?
We always need volleyball coaches at Sydney.
Right?
Gonna coach too.
That's kind of expected.
You're
Physical
right.
education teacher.
Right? Well, if you're an All-American for 2 years in volleyball.
Right?
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, a volleyball coach.
Otherwise, looking for a motion to approve our personnel sheet.
So moved.
In a second.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded to approve the personnel recommendation sheet for May 11th, 2020, including new employment contracts conditioned upon passing the background check and district mandated drug screening as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Dehart?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll?
Yes.
Mr. Martell?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ray?
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow?
Yes.
Ms. Degner?
Yes.
Ms. Gottschalk?
Yes.
Motion carried. School gifts this evening.
Yeah, I got a couple school gifts. Let me find the right document. Joanne Schaefer has donated an aluminum discus circle to the high school valued at $174.08. The Community Foundation of Southern Wisconsin has donated $1,000 in funds to the district to support the meal delivery program. The Elkhorn Area High School All Sports Booster Club has donated $11,909.82 to the high school for the purchase of equipment for the volleyball, track, cheer, soccer, and golf teams. And Lynn Jecka has donated $1,000 to Tibbetts Elementary to be used at the discretion of Mr. Foss. I want to thank all of them for their support to the district.
Any questions?
Just a comment, it was nice to see the Booster Club support some of the requests from some of the sports that aren't the really, like basketball, football, you know, the ones that attract the most attention.
They've been doing that for years. People just don't realize it. 'Cause
Exactly.
We've been on that for a long time, and
Yeah.
you know, you go in thinking it's all going to be basketball, football,
Right.
and it's not.
Yeah.
So it is
Exactly.
nice.
It was nice to see them. I mean, I know all the teams get to, I've been on the
Sure.
Booster Club for quite a while, but, you know, all the teams submit requests
Right.
every year, but
Yep.
they don't all get supported every year. So it was just nice to see some of those other things that have been there for a long time can get supported this year.
Anything else? Otherwise, looking for a motion to approve our gifts.
I'll move to approve the generous gifts as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the generous gifts of Joanne Schaefer, the Community Foundation of Southern Wisconsin, the Elkhorn Area High School All Sports Booster Club, and Lynn Jecka as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Dehart,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll,
Yes.
Mr. Martell,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow,
Yes.
Ms. Degner,
Yes.
Ms. Gottschalk.
Yes.
Motion carried. Second reading of policies.
Okay. I have not had any feedback since our last meeting regarding the policies that are up for second reading. Are there any of the policies that anyone would like to review one more time?
I don't have any.
Hearing none, looking for a motion.
I move to approve revised policies 365, copyright compliance, 460, student scholarships, 511, equal opportunity employment, 513, employee harassment, 522.4, use of information technology and communication resources, and 527, conflict of interest, and to delete policies 512, harassment, and 535.3, job sharing as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve revised policies 365 copyright compliance, 460 student scholarships, 511 equal opportunity employment, 513 employee harassment, 522.4 use of information technology and communication resources, and 527 conflict of interest, and to delete policies 512 harassment and 535.3 job sharing as presented. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart,
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll,
Yes.
Mr. Martell,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow,
Yes.
Ms. Degner,
Yes.
and Ms. Gottschalk.
Yes.
Motion carried. Teacher contracts.
Hey, the link that y'all have has a listing of all the teacher contracts for 2020, 2021. We just need formal approval of those.
Any questions? I know what's going on there. Looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve the 2020-21 teacher contracts as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the 2020-2021 teacher contracts as presented. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Fisher,
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart, Mrs. Ingersoll,
Yes.
Mr. Martell,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mrs. Ray,
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow,
Yes.
Ms. Degner,
Yes.
and Ms. Gottschalk.
Yes.
Motion carried. Announcements?
No, this is just for a learning opportunity. Ms. Degner, you should probably have seen too.
Yeah.
But that's okay because it's in a, how do you put it, a recommendation vote anyway. But if you guys are ever on,
That's true.
like a public board in the future, if you have a family member that you directly benefit who receives the compensation then you need to abstain. All right. So now you have to tell your mom that she cannot help you with college because you voted her for
Whoops. Whoops.
Okay. Let's see. I have to pull it up. Okay, good. You're smiling.
I know, I was wondering, you can't see it. It got really quiet.
All right. We go to the announcements. I have a few things some live links in there. One of the outcomes, I guess, with the COVID and the return to school, what will that look like? What situation will we be in the fall? The question kind of came up with the referendum, and I posed that to the buildings or to the committee that was looking at it. What would be the possibility if we threw this out there to potentially start the project sooner rather than wait until the original timeline that we were looking at in May and then going through next summer. And I would say Dan Davis from CJ Schmidt, I think he got kind of, I would describe it as seemed a little excited about that in the sense that he felt like we could capitalize on some savings, that it was doable. If doable on the architects, the design phase, because that's really asking Kehoe and Henry to step up from that timeline standpoint. But he really felt that there would be some benefits there to that. In what we could get done, and we could have that building fixed ahead of time. One of the other factors is, it's that furnace system. Who knows? It could last another 20 years. But what we do know is, I think last year.
It's like the phone system, it's not going to last forever.
Fuel is still driving, cars from the 50s. You just got to keep fixing it. So, so it depends on how much you want to put into it. Last year, I believe they spent about $50,000 just to keep it running. That doesn't mean the
So I
utility
guess we
costs.
spend $100,000 a year. even.
That's just the maintenance
Right.
cost on it, yeah. They, Borpagel had shared with them to plan on at least $27,000 in maintenance on it this year, just to keep it
It's
running.
gonna be underwater.
So, it could be, the longer we wait, yeah, it could be underwater again, but, so, to make a long story short, the only piece, it makes a lot of sense potentially to get rolling sooner rather than later, but, the virtual school is not just what makes it really unique and special and why we have our families is because it's not 100% virtual. It has a lot of face-to-face contact, blended contact, kids coming in on a daily basis. That's why we need the school in the first place. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense to me for us to make a decision absent of the parents' sentiment, and then upset a bunch of parents who then don't want to send the kids there in the fall, and then, lose tens of thousands of dollars in open enrollment revenue to save $27,000, or whatever,
Right.
a couple $100,000 in the short term. So we really want the parent feedback. Tricia did a great job putting together a letter and putting together a survey for them. This just went out today. We have a large sample size of 13 so far, which represents about 5% responses. The number will go up quite a bit on that. But, so, I mean, it's really too early to gauge, what that looks like. But, why isn't it giving me the chart?
You click up on that right
Yeah,
corner.
Should be on the summary. There we go.
There you go.
All right, so right now about 70% are saying they like option 2, which is start in the fall, where we could start as soon as we purchase it in August. And then CG Schmidt's projecting that they could have it done by December, the project. So we would have to come up with some alternative locations and sites for the blended portion, assuming we can do a face-to-face blended portion in the first place, and work through that. So what I'd like to do is let this survey go through, a few days, and then probably follow up with the families that were no, and identify, hey, what does your no mean? Through discussions with them, will we still be able to retain those families? Because we can't afford to lose 30% of our families over a construction timeline. But there is an opportunity there, and it looks like a lot of support behind going ahead and moving forward with that sooner rather than later. Any questions on that announcement?
No, I think that's a great thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Spot on.
All right. COVID updates. Everyone's, I don't know, it's my least favorite topic right now, but we have to talk about it. Wanted to share this link to you. It's embedded in there. Some good news this morning when we looked at this gets updated daily. In order for us to enter the Badger Bounce Back Plan Phase 1, these are the indicators and the status of where we're at on that path. This morning, when we shared it with the administrative team, we only had 2 green indicators, these 2. So today's updates, the cases on a 14-day period, that just turned green.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I said last week, the top and bottom ones were green. The
Yeah, that's right. The top one was green last week. Yeah.
From green to red.
So you can look at this data and it'll show you where you're at, and it can fluctuate from day to day. The magic time will be when we all hit green on the same day.
Well, it's interesting because you look at their own data, because I've looked at this pretty extensively. You look at their own data, and some of those data points are falling off the way it says they're supposed to, but they're still not opened up green. So
Yeah, it's because it has to hit a statistically significant threshold of greater than 0.05.
0.05.
So this was 0.45. This one's 0.24, which is
We don't know
good.
that.
You can track it on a daily basis. That's down. That number's down from when we looked at it today. And it can move because the category that it dropped, it went from, which one was it? This one here. When we looked this morning, I think it was like a 0.52 and it dropped to 0.049. So it just met that threshold.
You know, with them, they're opening up more testings everywhere, so you know, again, it's just gonna keep
Right.
fluctuating because the more you test, the more you'll find.
Right.
Although they may not be,
But they account for that.
Serious.
So
oh, they do.
yeah, so that it's
Okay.
based on the percentage. So the more you test,
Uh-huh,
one of the metrics is the percentage of those who got tested, what's the infection rate?
okay.
So they're not looking at total cases. they're
Oh,
looking
okay.
at-
Because when you look at the county, that's what I'm looking at with their numbers, is you're looking at the total that have been tested.
They're looking at that reinfection rate is what
Okay.
they're wanting to drop. So just wanted you, as far as, be aware of that, that was information there. So you know what we're doing from an administrative team, we're working on, we're gonna put together a cross-sectional what we'll call a re-entry team to develop, 4 scenarios, potential scenarios based on the information we know. We have some schools that they're going as far as planning, we're gonna be online in the fall, so we're gonna end school early and we're gonna train all our staff on just teaching online. And from my perspective, we'll develop scenarios and look at it and plan accordingly, and then try to choose the best, not the best case scenario, the scenario that we feel will be most likely based off the information that we have. And I'll probably try to push that timeline back to late August or late July, early August. So I think we'll kind of be in okay, now we've got to get rolling. But we are beginning to order items that we have a pretty significant assurity that we're going to need come fall, like thermometers, to check foreheads. But I don't want to outlay a lot of money for resources that we don't know if we will need. But at the same time, I don't want us to come fall and say, yeah, sorry parents, they're all opening, but we're not because we didn't order anything.
Right.
ahead of time.
Right.
Kind of like us with
Kind of
elections.
like toilet paper, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're ordering cases by the truckload.
Truckloads of
Sell
toilet
those.
paper.
That's how we're gonna cover our budget deficit. No, we're not gonna do that. It's a bad joke if that's out there.
I did see a vehicle, they had a picture of a vehicle, a woman with a big van in like a cul-de-sac, and she had the back end open and she was trying to stop.
What are they gonna say?
They just won't stop?
No, that was online.
Oh, that's not-
Yeah,
I think it's
it could be
illegal.
used, you know.
So any questions on that? That's what we're looking at. And you'll get questions from parents. I don't know what it's going to look like.
Right, yeah, we don't.
What I can say is everybody, all the information they're telling us is it will not look like doing business as usual.
Right.
And I would also say it's probably unlikely that all 100% of the kids will be allowed to be in the building at the same time at the start. Other than that, I don't know. But we'll keep working on that and wait for further guidance. Graduation, moving to August based on student feedback. We had a pretty good, over half the seniors did respond back. I know this is a little small. You can, we can blow it up if you want. But we put out there, originally Mr. Trier sent out to the students, hey, we'd like some ideas, what you'd like to see for graduation. And most of the responses back were things that we couldn't do, like we want a regular graduation on a regular date. And we couldn't do that. So we said, well, why don't we put together a survey that gives like
Specific.
some choices that we know that we can do. So that's what we put together on the survey. One was a virtual graduation. Oh, sorry, I'm laughing. Saturday Night Live skit pops in my head. But and again, personally, we didn't like we looked at webinars, we attended training. We didn't like the virtual option, but we wanted the students to fit. So we put that out there. We came up with, based off of feedback from students and parents, hey, how about a hybrid type approach where you do the casting? So it's kind of like a virtual, but then you have kids lined up in cars and do a parade. Put that out as an option. And then we put August date in format pending potential state national guidelines. Overwhelmingly, the students responded that they would rather defer to August. Just from anecdotal comments and some email responses that I've had, I think it's because a lot of them still have a lot of hope that come August, we'll be in a situation where we can do a more traditional style
Yeah.
graduation.
Yeah.
I won't comment on the likelihood of that. I don't know. I hope that's the case as well. I think all of us do too. What we're hearing does not indicate that, but it still gives us time. Come July, after July 4th, we'll put together a committee of parents and our students, whoever wants to be involved with that. We'll send a notice out to invite people to be a part of that planning committee. We'll gather ideas from that committee in line with what we can do, or what we're projected to be able to do at that time. And then we have a date selected by the end of July, which Mr. Trottier referred to, I like the name, a go, no-go date on that plan. What we do know is that we should be able to, whatever the circumstance is, be able to do the hybrid type graduation. We did talk to the health department. They felt that that is in line, you can pull that off. The State Department of Health their recommendation is virtual only. They said, but if your local health department, your law enforcement is okay with it, our type scenario, they would, they said you can do that if your local authorities sign off on it. But with the caveat, everybody has to stay in their car, and if you're handing the diploma to them, everybody in the car is wearing a mask. So that's, we know if that's okay now, we know that will be okay then as a minimum. So that's where we're at on the students. Any thoughts or questions you have on that?
No, I don't think at this time. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Okay. And I know we'll still get communications from parents. We have some other things that are going out for students and some other plans that are kind of, surprises that we wanted. But let's just say there's certain supplies in the market that are getting scarce as well. So that's delayed some of the things that we've done, like ink supplies, stuff like that. So. But we're working on some of that as well to try to make it special. And we do get questions from people, and as board members, you're probably gonna have people approach you, hey, why can't we get the students together and do this? What I can let them know is we as a school can't sponsor, host, or organize a large gathering like that. And I wouldn't necessarily encourage it, can't be perceived as that, but you as a parent or as a community member or as a group, if you want to go and do that, not on school grounds, go right ahead. But we can't sanction or organize. We don't have that. Department of Health has directed that, we can't do that right now. So I would, you can let people know that it doesn't take away their ability to still do that if they want to. That's their choice. Okay, and then we'll finalize that graduation date in August, but I think we're looking at that first week in August. I believe August 6th. All right. Any questions on the announcements? All right, we do have a closed session item to review a request from staff.
Looking for a motion to adjourn the session.
Oh, hold on a second.
I move to adjourn to contemplated closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, parenthetical 1, parenthetical C, to discuss retirement benefits for a staff member. School board will not reconvene in open.
I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.851C to discuss retirement benefits for a staff member. The board will not reconvene in open session. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Fisher?
Yes.
Mr. Gayheart?
Yes.
Mrs. Ingersoll?
Yes.
Mr. Martell?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mrs. Ray?
Yes.
Mr. Scarrow?
Yes.
Ms. Degner?
Yes.
Ms. Gottschalk?
Yes.
We're in closed session. We'll take a couple-minute break, make sure everything's secure.
Hey, Paul, I'm gonna send a new calendar invite for you.
Okay.